How's it going? This is a speed square. It has this ledger along the side, and it has this information printed on it or cast in it, depending on what kind you get. Rafter information. This is also a speed square, and it's just larger for when you're working with larger pieces of lumber. However, some of the features of it are similar, but a little bit different, and so when you go to get one, you want to pay attention to what you would prefer. Everybody knows that you can set the ledger against the edge of any piece of lumber and strike a line, and that you have a 90-degree angle here between the side and the edge, or the new cut. It'll be perpendicular. Another super handy feature is this window that'll hold your pencil at certain intervals. It's going to be hard to do with one hand, but you can drag the square, keeping the ledger tight to the side, and you make yourself a stick of a certain width. You can illustrate that really easily. Anything that you know, any layout lines you know need to be a certain distance from the edge of something, you can often use your speed square like that. You'll notice, like I said, you want to pay attention to what ones you buy. I could do every 1/4 of an inch will hold a pencil on this speed square on both sides of the groove, but every other 1/8 of an inch, I don't have the ability to put a pencil there. That's why I like this bigger square. You'll notice the notches are offset rather than the same across. So I can use 4, 4 1/8, 4 1/4, 4 3/8, 4 1/2, and so on. That's a feature of this square. I painted this red. It was sort of a problem once it started chipping off. It's made it really difficult to find the numbers and stuff that I'm looking for, so you want to be aware of that. The red got down into the numbers, so if I gave this a quick sand, it would actually remain and help it to be written. So the red, someday I may do something like that. Another feature here, we're not going to get into the rafter component to this because it really gets old school, I think. But for now, what you need to remember is that if this is 90 degrees, like that, so long as you keep this tip, see how that says pivot on it right there? It's hard to see. Pivot. And it has a little notch out of it. When you set this square up and you put the pivot notch and you roll the square out, notice how the edge of the material lines up with these degree marks as we go? That's because this is at 5 degrees. That does not mean that this is at 5 degrees. Let's keep us up here. That means that this angle between here and there is 5 degrees. This angle between here and there is 5 degrees. This is 5 degrees, right? Which means if this was 90 and this is 5, our new angle between here and here is 85. That's the angle on this piece of material if we were to cut that. That's where people get confused. They're able to read the square, and you'll find that the square works just like the miter saw works, 10 degrees. I set it for 10. I put the mark on here. Now this is 10 degrees. If I had been careful about my point here, this would be 10. This would now be an 80-degree angle on this piece of lumber. And you'll find that that's when the last piece of this I'm going to do on the board here, but when you approach the miter saw, looking from above, if this is the surface of the miter saw, oftentimes it's got a circle on it, like that, and the wings come over like this, and it's the front of it like that, and your blade is in here like this, in the guard. That's how you walk up to the miter saw. And somebody tells you, I need a piece with a 10-degree angle on it. This is the problem that we have around the job site. You don't need a piece with a 10-degree angle on it. You need 10 degrees cut off of this piece. So when we place it on the miter saw and we set the miter saw to 10 degrees, which is what this will say here, when you move it over that amount, you set it to 10 degrees, you're not cutting a piece with a 10-degree angle on it. You're cutting 10 degrees out of 90 degrees because the miter saw is at 90 degrees. The blade is at 90 to the workpiece to the fence, 90. So that's why the miter saw, you set at 10 degrees right here. When you go to 45, well, yeah, of course, because 45 is half of 90, you're cutting off 45 degrees and you're leaving 45 degrees. But that's the only angle measurement that works that way. Every other setting on the miter saw refers to the amount, the degrees that you are removing from 90. off the end of the piece. And this is why people get confused, because they start talking about the angle that they need on a piece and measuring the angle, and it doesn't translate to the miter saw. It's because the miter saw starts at 90 degrees, not at 0. This is 0 degrees back here. So technically, to make yourself a piece that's got a 10-degree angle on it, you need to be set at 80 degrees, which you can't set on the miter saw, and you need to start getting into jigs and stuff like that. But you'll find that using the speed square, if you had a piece of lumber with an angle on it somewhere in here, let's call it there somewhere, and you needed to know how to set the miter saw up to copy that, I come over here, I find where that new line, I find where that line stops at the edge, I turn the triangle out if it was a straight line so that it lines up, and this is tight. Then I come over here and I read, that looks like 45, 46, 47, maybe 48 degrees is what I need to set the miter saw to replicate this. So I come over to the miter saw, I set it to 48 degrees, and I make that cut, and I'll come over and I'll have a piece of lumber that has that angle measurement on it. I've removed that measurement. What I measured with the square is what I took away from 90. What I'm left with, you'll have to do a little math in your head. I'm all the time using that equation in my head. Remember to take the number that I'm talking about from 90. It's always from 90. It's not the angle itself. And that's how you use most of what's printed on a speed square.